From being one of the pioneers of narco-music to being found murdered next to an irrigation canal in the Mexican state of Sinaloa, Chalino Sanchez's life is damn near wild that his story almost feels like a Hollywood Western. He would be later known as one of the godfathers of narco-corridos, which are ballads dedicated to cartel members of stories about the narco lifestyle. Sanchez would essentially be the standard when it came to artists wanting to step into the genre, though the thing that set Chalino apart from the rest of his future narco-artists was the fact that he was actually about the life he sang of. His sudden death at the age of 31 would shock the rising star's fans and would spark various theories as to who or why someone would murder the king of corridos. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for stopping by. Grab a drink or grab several of those fuckers. And welcome to the short-lived fame and fall of Chalino Sanchez. Chalino Sanchez was born in 1960 to a poor family in the state of Sinaloa and was raised in a small town about 20 miles east of Culiacan. LA Weekly would state that Chalino thought his name sounded too much like a woman's name. He preferred the nickname Chalino. He'd have 7 brothers and 1 sister and would be introduced to a life of violence stemming back to an incident when he was just 15 years old. It was in the mid-70s that changed Chalino's life forever. Writer Elijah Wald would write an article for PBS stating, "When he was a child, a local tough f***ed his sister, and at the age of 15, Chalino ran into the man at a party, walked up to him without saying a word, and shot him to death. With that, he had to leave town, and he moved to Los Angeles to live with an aunt. He would illegally cross into the United States, began working in the fields of Coachella Valley, and had a side hustle as a coyote smuggling illegal immigrants and drugs from Mexico with his brother Armando Sanchez. Though Chalino was living a life of crime, the 1980s would ultimately be a turning point in career paths for the king of narco-corridos. In 1984, Armando was shot and killed in Tijuana, and the story is that Chalino's first corrido was written shortly afterward to preserve his brother's memory. The song would state that Armando was shot 7 times by one of his closest friends. After writing his brother's ballad, Chalino would be jailed for a few months where his music career was slowly on the rise. While behind bars, he wrote songs for fellow inmates in return for money or favors, and after his short stay in jail, Chalino would turn his writing talents into a sort of side hustle. He'd hire local artists to sing his ballads, but didn't like the way they sang his tunes, so he basically ended up taking over. So why did Chalino want someone else to sing his songs? It's simple. He's claimed to have said that he never sang, just barked. Word spread in the underground world of corridos, and the story goes that Chalino would write songs for some well-known cartel members, including his hometown buddy Coquillo Castro.
In a plea agreement, Castro admitted trafficking in tons of cocaine and tens of millions of dollars. A judge sentenced him to nearly 17 years in prison. Although he was arrested in Los Angeles, Castro is a Mexican citizen. More importantly, according to U.S. authorities, Castro was part of the notorious Mexican drug organization headed by brothers Benjamin and Ramon Arellano Felix. Castro is related to the men.
In the late 80s, he'd record multiple cassettes and sold these ballads out of the back of his trunk, down to local swap meets. Chalino's narco ballads hardly received any airtime, and it would really be an incident on January 24th of 1992 that would really launch the start of his short-lived career. Chalino would sing at Plaza Los Arcos in January of 1992 in the desert community of Coachella, California. The dance hall hosted around 400 people for the singer that ultimately resulted in 1 dead and 10 injured. Chalino was often known to receive notes on stage asking for songs or dedications when a man named Edward Gallegos jumped onto the stage and shot Chalino Sanchez, who uses the stage name Chalino, police said. Sanchez, who was taking dedications at the time, pulled out his own gun and shot back. The singer's gunfire apparently missed the alleged attacker, but may have hit other people on the dance floor, Murillo said. The innocent bystander would be Rene Carranza, who was 20 years old and died 12 hours later at John F. Kennedy Memorial Hospital in Indio. Chalino, who was 31 at the time, was in critical condition after undergoing surgery at Desert Hospital in Palm Springs, where Gallegos, who was the shooter, was also listed in critical condition. The other victims were treated and released, police said. No arrests had been made. They're both in the hospital, the captain said. Until we sort this thing out, we won't take them into custody. The shootout was ultimately ruled as self-defense and Chalino would serve no jail time. This event would be the definition of all publicity is good publicity, as Chalino's sales skyrocketed and he finally began to get some airplay, though only for an old-fashioned, non-narco pop song called Nieves de Enero.
No sé si sea prudente, pero creo que es importante comentar. Hubo un suceso accidental, no fue con ninguna mala intención o con alguien desquiciado o lo que sea, pero Chalino Sánchez estuvo a punto de perder la vida hace aproximadamente ¿cuánto tiempo, Chalino?
Va a ser 2 meses ahora, el 24.
Se corrió el rumor por todas partes. O sea, hay mucha gente que tiene toda la creencia que te moriste.
Sí, que todavía está ahí encerrado en el círculo, que piensan que ya me morí, que ya me velaron, que ya me enterraron, pero...
As Chalino's popularity was slowly rising, he began to feel like death was slowly creeping in and needed some sort of security for his family. He would sign a deal with Musart, which is one of Mexico's biggest recording and publishing companies, giving Musart the rights to his songs and him enough money to buy a house for his wife and children. This deal, which reportedly earned him the impressive sum of 350,000 pesos, at the time roughly around 115,000 US dollars, made perfect sense in the street corrido world, where songs rarely outlast their singers, but would turn out to be a disastrous financial miscalculation. The contract gave away all rights with no royalty provisions, and Chalino's family was thus robbed of any share in the millions earned after he became a legend. Even though the bullet pierced his lung, he'd returned back to his performances in March of 1992. It seemed as if things were finally panning out for Chalino and would return back to his home state of Sinaloa on May 15, 1992, after fleeing to the United States for the murder of his sister's predator when he was in his mid-teens. According to one of Chalino's brothers, his family and friends were both excited but had an eerie feeling for the singer's performance later that night. The night was normal. He was scheduled for a performance in Salón Bugambilias in Culiacán. It was a night to remember for Chalino. Singing in front of some of his family members in his hometown was a dream any successful up-and-coming artist ever wanted. He was used to receiving notes on stage requesting songs, but it is widely speculated that on this night, Chalino would receive what would be known today as the Death Note. It is said that the note threatened death upon Chalino, and the look of concern on his face when receiving this note is evidenced through his last video. He'd leave his performance shortly after midnight with a couple of people where it is said 2 Suburbans pulled the singer over, with the occupants claiming to be state police. The supposed officers also claimed that their captain wanted to see the singer. Chalino would leave with the men, not knowing his decision would lead to his torturous finale. A few hours later, around 6 in the morning, a few residents in a nearby town noticed a man lying by an irrigation canal. He wore a blindfold and would later be confirmed that he'd been shot twice in the back of the head. Chalino Sanchez would be shortly identified in the remaining hours of May 16, 1992. He would die shortly before his 32nd birthday. If you stuck around to the end of this video, you get a dab from me. It was unclear who shot the king of corridos, with many speculations surrounding the murderer and their motives. One theory suggests that it was revenge for killing the man that messed with his sister, who was a supposed cartel member. Another theory suggests that Chalino was simply playing the wrong songs at the wrong place, with cartel members retaliating for the ballads. One recent corrido suggests that Chalino was fooling around with a narco's girlfriend, to which Sanchez's wife angrily refutes the ballad's claims. The truth is, no one will ever know what this supposed death note said, or if whoever brandished their IDs at him were actual state cops. His son would follow in his footsteps and was just as good as his father, though his life would also be cut short due to a car accident that was caused by a faulty brake. Chalino Sanchez left behind a legacy, and I often wonder what would have happened to the man whose talent was taken away from the world at an early age.